Penn State head football coach Matt Campbell. How's it sound?
Still getting used to it, but man, the sound of it, really grateful and really honored to hear those words.
There's been a lot of, obviously, local but even national attention on this coaching search. Thing went, I think, 54 days. A lot of names were thrown around. It kind of felt like I was watching a blender, and I wanted to know what ended up getting poured out. And it ends up being you. I know, man, you're in the weeds at Iowa State during all this, but you got to be aware, at least, that there is a search going on. So I'm interested from your vantage point, which no one got to see. Walk me through kind of the timeline of how this unfolded, when you became aware that there was interest, to this moment when you're sitting here and you're being introduced as the new head coach today.
Yeah, and I think, Josh, you know me enough in terms of, man, I think one of my best qualities and maybe worst qualities is when the season starts, I can really, navigate the outside noise. There's enough adversity that's going to happen in any football season, and especially at Iowa State. And, we got off to a great start. You have pillaged with your football team with injuries, and you're in a losing streak. And so my constant attention, yes, you knew the Penn State job, just because you know what's going on in the national news, but you certainly don't know what's really going on around it. When I heard it, it was obviously, oh man, I know what the tradition and history of that place is, and personally, there's a connection both from my family standpoint and being close to this football program. But really, that was about it for me. And then you kind of battled back with our Cyclones. We had this incredible run to finish the season, which I was so proud of, and when you got to the end of the season, of course, you're kind of like, okay, you're really, I was meeting with our seniors on Tuesday, getting ready to meet with our juniors, sophomores, and freshmen on Wednesday. And it was, midday Wednesday when, somebody had reached out and said, hey, Pat Kraft would love the opportunity to speak with you. And, I called Jamie Poller, athletic director at Iowa State, and just said, hey, listen, I at least feel like I need to take this phone call and listen to what Pat has to say. We talked for a while on Wednesday night, and really it was from that point on, it was a whirlwind 5 days. The next day on Thursday, got an opportunity to do a Zoom call, with President Neely, and she was incredible. And by Thursday night, Pat and his crew were able to come over and, just kind of really start to talk about what their vision was for Penn State football, what they were looking for, was this or could this be a really good fit? And, we left there on Thursday night with really no agreement, because I felt like it was my responsibility to Iowa State, my wife, our kids, to really sit down and say, is this the right situation? Is this the right time for us? And, by the time we got to Friday evening, you knew for me this was the right time. But it's been a whirlwind. It went fast, but for me it was the right decision.
You've been at Iowa State for right at a decade, right? Man, I remember talking to you before about when you left Toledo.
Yeah.
And this was a couple of springs ago, and I remember you went way in depth about how hard it was for you to leave Toledo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm from Ohio. I didn't really even want to leave Toledo. It was hard to get me out of there. And so you were really dug in at Iowa State. I'm sure there were various points where you thought, this may be where I finish my career.
Absolutely.
But there was, probably always a part of you who understood, never say never. There is a possibility down the road, who knows. When you pictured that possibility, the possibility that one day there may be a situation perfect enough where I have to leave here, one of the things I imagine you dreading would be telling whichever team you had at that point, guys, I'm taking another opportunity. Yeah. And that's what I kept thinking about during this whole process. Even after the announcement came, is I know good and well he's got to meet with his team. When you met with them, what was that like?
Yeah, I would say the most gut-wrenching process that I've ever had to go through. And I think you're right. We talked about this the last time, and I think for me to ever leave, it had to be right in three ways. By my family, number one. Number two, the leadership, who you were going to link arms with. Could you link arms with people that, were the right people for you? And then number three, most importantly, and we talked about this at Iowa State, where you have a chance to go somewhere you can stand for what's right. Because I feel like for 14 years now as a head football coach, we've never wavered from those value systems. And I think that was really the tipping point for maybe this is the right job. Maybe this is the right time. You know, for my family, it's 2.5 hours away from home. It's the opportunity for my parents, my wife's parents, man, our kids to see their grandparents and be involved in this journey. Leadership, you know, our world's changed and it's changing. And to me, you need a partner right now in this journey. You need somebody that, man, is progressive and that's trying to find a way forward. And I felt like you had a president, you had an athletic director here that were really trying to forge their way forward. And then, you know, the last part of it is, you know, this place has stood for integrity and honor. And in their greatest moments and their greatest times, some of the greatest players in the history of football and what they've been about, those things were, I felt like, aligned with the values that we built our program and what I believe football should be about. And so, you know, when those matched up, you're right, the only tipping part of the scale for me the other way was our kids. And our kids, I've always felt like I don't want to be the person that felt like I lied to anybody, because that integrity, my word, and doing right by the 18 to 22-year-old young men, it still is my number one priority. I love to win. All those things are great. But that's more important to me than anything. And I didn't want to have our young men in our football program look at me and feel like, you know what, this guy's told me one thing and then did another. And, you know, Josh, that night on Friday night after telling them, like, you know, almost 2 a.m. at my office with every young man that came through and had an opportunity to sit down and talk. And I'm really grateful for their support, and I think they understood. They were nothing short of exceptional to me. And as hard as it was, it gave great closure because our young men really, really, really stood by my side, and I really appreciated that.
You mentioned we're kind of in a new era in a multitude of ways, but we're watching a major coaching change happen here. That's happened before.
Yeah.
Many guys have been through it. Very few guys have been through it in sort of the new portal era, the new NIL era, which means sometimes you walk in and a recruiting class has sort of evaporated. Right. And I'm just very curious, as are probably most people, from the time you say yes and pen hits paper and you're on a plane and you come over here, your mind's got to be going at as fast a warp speed as it possibly could for a human, from roster retention to what is our portal strategy, to what is our resource pool, to who am I going to hire, to how do I scout the current roster, who do they currently have on staff, just a million different things, which you're in the middle of right now as we talk. You just got introduced today. How do you, I don't even ask how you deal with it, how do you start to stack the priority of what comes first, second, third?
Well, I think that's a great point, and all those things are at warp speed around us right now. But I still think you got to start small, and you got to go with what's most important. And what is most important right now are the young men that have reside in this football program. And I think every decision you have to do is make sure you understand what happened here, what was good, what wasn't good, how do we move forward, and what are each and every one of you individuals choosing to do moving forward. Because I think sometimes you think, well, I've got this great philosophy, it's one size fits all. One size doesn't fit all for every program and every situation. So I think the first thing, the first priority is figuring out, where are we? Where is this program right now? And then making the right moves forward from there. You know, whether that has to do with how do you build the 2026 team, whether it has to do with building our staff, whether it has to do with, you know, finding out, you know, what we're going to do with the portal. But I think you have to come and ask the right questions. I think you have to be, check your ego at the door, and be willing to be humble enough to figure out what are the situations, what are the challenges, so you can make the right moves moving forward. I think if you're fast and wrong, I think you may never get off the ground. I think if you're efficient and right, then I think you can make the right calls, and that's what we're going to have to do.
From the time you take the job, obviously, you're negotiating a new deal, but you're aware, before you even know the specifics, you're going to have a much bigger resource pool at Penn State than you did at Iowa State. The trade-off to that is there are much higher expectations externally. I'm not saying internally your expectations change at all, but also there's a whole lot more, for lack of a better term, noise. There's a lot more on the plate of the head coach at Penn State, maybe than there was at Iowa State. How do you balance that change in just saying one size may not fit all everywhere, and being as hands-on as you can versus maybe delegating a little bit more? Maybe I got to zoom out a little bit more. Maybe I go 20 degrees more towards CEO as opposed to what I was like. You haven't experienced it yet, like that's coming, but how much thought have you given to that?
Yeah, I certainly have, and I think, again, where we can get lost in this profession is you can start to worry about the things you can't control, and you start to worry about the outside noise, and it paralyzes what is going on right in front of you. And, believe me, as a young coach, I'm still growing. And I think the last time we talked, I know that I don't have it all figured out. But one of the things that I figured out really fast is, boy, you better have the ability to zoom focus on what's important right now. And I think that's an area for me that I take great pride in. It's also critical to hire the right people around you, people that you have absolute trust in, which I think is really hard to find in this profession, and make sure that you align yourself with the right people so you have efficiency. You can put your focus on what you need to focus on when you need to focus on those things. And that'll be critical for us to have success. You're right. There are great expectations. And I think the thing that I appreciate, we've had championship expectations. We've been with way less resources on the verge against the haves, the Oklahomas, the Texases, the Oregons, the Miamis, and we've been able to do it without the support and resources. And now to be able to continue the cultural aspect of our program and add some of the unification of leadership and support around us, I think those things are really exciting.
Look, I'll drop a metaphor here. It's not quite this extreme, but in the movie Castaway, Tom Hanks is on the island for a long time. And so he just has to make do however he may do.
That's right.
And so he's throwing spears at fish, he's trying to build his own fire and everything, and then they rescue him, and he's in the airport terminal there when he gets back on the mainland, and he's just looking at how easy it is to make fire.
Yeah.
And he's looking at all this food around him, and there's every kind of seafood he could want, and this and that, and he just looks at it and says, what do I even do with this?
Right.
Again, like I said, not that extreme.
Right.
But when you come from a place where you guys literally had to build your collective yourself from scratch, to a place where you are looking at a war chest, for lack of a better term, of resource, and you're looking at an established recruiting base and an established recruiting footprint, and you're right in the middle of Big Ten country, and you can sell the visibility of the Penn State brand. I don't need to sell the program to you. You took the job already. Right. But when you look at all of the bounty here versus what you had to fight and scratch to even hope to cobble together at Iowa State, all due respect to Iowa State, how do you start to decide in your mind how I use this but still maintain that filter that I used to have to run every player through before they ever hit the field for me, before they ever put on an Iowa State uniform?
Well, I think because the sport of football hasn't changed and the world maybe has changed around it, and I think one of the great gifts of having to come up the rough side of the mountain and do it the hard way is you figured out the right way of development, the right way of building a locker room, and understanding that it's great to have great resources, the financial piece of it, but there's a lot of people that have that and haven't won. And so the reality of it is it's still about the alignment of the people, the development of the people, and unifying the people going in the right direction at the right time. And so I think what we're really grateful for is we had to do it that way. And now it allows us, yes, there may be some more resources that we have at our hand and disposal, but the character, the integrity, how we're going to build a team, that can't change because that's what allowed us to win football games. That's what allowed us to be the team in those critical moments in the fourth quarter or beat the teams we were able to beat during our time at Iowa State. Less talented, but more collectively a team, and those have to be the same guideposts for us moving forward.
There's been a lot of talk from fans about what the general manager position will look like, could look like at Penn State. you brought Derek Hoosier over with you, and he sort of ended up performing that role for you at Iowa State. How do you see that working out here?
Yeah, I think from Derek's perspective, man, Derek was the guy that started a collective. He was the guy that was fundraising for the collective. He was the guy that was helping write the contracts. He was the guy that had to literally do it all from scratch. And again, I think when you have to build it from scratch, it gives you great responsibility when you have the resources, that how those resources should be used. How do you build out a great team around you? How do you build out the right team around you? And what does that need to look like for us to be successful within our culture? And so, I'm really excited for Derek's opportunity. He's earned it. And I think, when you have to build it from the ground up, you're really grateful to come into a place where there's great support to help you continue to align the vision moving forward.
If I'm taking a job, once I get past the stuff on the surface that everyone would ask about, first thing I would look at is my quarterback position. That's what I always focus on. You had Rocco Becht at Iowa State. Drew Aller kind of exits here as you walk in. Ethan Grunkmeyer took over for him during the season. What have you seen so far when you've assessed the quarterback position, and when do you start to decide how you guys are going to approach that position moving forward?
Yeah, well, the great thing is we get to meet with Ethan here this week, and we actually recruited him out of high school and have got a really strong relationship from that beginning process. And I think globally you got to look at our program, and the quarterback piece of it's critical, because I still think whoever is going to be the quarterbacks in our program, they have to be aligned to the head football coach. And I believe when the quarterback and the head football coach are aligned in their values, how they're going to lead the locker room, what they're going to stand for, then I think great things can happen. And so I think for us, we start with the individual meetings with the young men in our program, and then we make great evaluation of what's best for us as we move this football program forward.
And then the second thing, as it relates to the Penn State job, that I would wonder from your aspect is, the National Signing Day just came and went, and because of the transition at the head coaching position here, you had a very, very small recruiting class, a very atypical looking recruiting class by Penn State standards. So, I've listened to you say a million times, we're going to build the program through high school recruiting, and I assume you're not budging on that position, but at the same time, it seems like an inevitability. You're going to really have to lean on the portal in your first cycle to make sure you have a competent roster you can put on the field. So I guess my question is, how do you balance the immediate need versus the eventual approach?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. I don't even know if we have the answer yet until we kind of work through this, but I think the reality still comes down to whether we continue in this current cycle for the 2016, find the best high school guys that would fit us, or we build through the transfer portal. It has to be about the character. It has to be about what we want this program to look like moving forward, and we can't waver. We can't collect talent. We've got to collect a football team and build a football team through talent acquisition, no matter how that looks and feels. And I think, knowing that this is year one for us, we better make darn sure that every young man that comes in here is a young man that's going to reflect where we want this program to go, the character, the standards of excellence, how we're going to work. And we're going to have to do a great job of that, and not flinching from our morals in that aspect of it. To the high school piece of it, we do sit in what is the greatest 6 to 8 hour radius, in my opinion, that you can build a football program around. And the opportunity to balance 26, but yet pouring into, this elite region and making sure we get off to a great start in 27 is another great balance too, that we can't just put all our eggs in this 2016. We're going to have to be doing an incredible job on 27 so we don't lose 2 classes and we get an opportunity to continue to do a great job. So we've got a lot of work in front of us, but I think we're all really excited to step into that.
What does that process look like in terms of familiarizing yourself with the high school scene? Not just in Pennsylvania, but maybe up and down the eastern seaboard. You're probably, respectfully again to your previous stop, you're probably recruiting a different caliber athlete. You know that you can get to the finish line on different caliber athletes. Probably means you're in different high schools, you're in different caliber recruiting races. But familiarizing yourself just with the footprint, as much as that still exists in the modern age, tangibly, what does that look like to you as we sort of get out of winter into spring and so on?
Well, I think the head football coach, first and foremost, is going to have to be at the forefront of on the go. And whether that is, making sure that we're touching base with the right high school programs, Zoom calls, or getting out physically and being present, it's going to be my responsibility. And it's one of the things I love about this job, and the opportunity to really connect with high school football coaches is still one of the things that I really enjoy the most. And, I still think for me, it's a lot more aligned to our Toledo footprint though. And, when we were at the University of Toledo, boy, Baltimore, Maryland, New Jersey, Western Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and those were the foundation of what we had the ability to build a football team and a program around. So we're not so far out of our footprint, and it's been 10 years, but I think a lot of those connections stayed with us even during our time at Iowa State. And I also think as our Iowa State program elevated through the years, we started to have the ability to start to recruit a higher caliber player. And I think that just going through that process allows us to make sure we know what we're looking for, man, what kind of young man fits our program, and obviously what kind of quality player fits our football program.
Your wife, your entire family were here today at your introductory press conference. You've mentioned them consistently throughout this process as long as I've known you. Yeah. That's always been sort of part of the formula for success. For people, specifically guys watching this right now, who have had to make big decisions, big career changes. Yeah. I mean, many people watching this have had to uproot their families, move them across the country. You just did it. Mm-hmm. Walk us through what those conversations are like at home, from the time the concept gets put on the table. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about wife, like kids. What is the feedback? What are some of the biggest questions you get thrown your way?
Well, on Wednesday night, my 18-year-old daughter is actually going to George Mason next year to run track. And when, I got off the phone call, my wife had already said something to her, and she said, "Hey, what would you think if we had the opportunity to be closer to you?" And it started there, and she was ecstatic that her mom would have the opportunity, and I would have the opportunity to be able to be 3 hours away from her. And then we have a 10th grade daughter. And so the only way I know how to handle that is actually, be upfront and honest with our kids, because I felt like if my kids felt like this wasn't the right move or the right time, I'm not going to sacrifice in my profession being a great father and being a great husband, because I've seen too many people say, "Hey, we're going to build football family, we're going to build football culture," and behind the scenes, it's absolutely opposite. And I refuse to ever allow that situation to happen in my life. And, no job is more important than my wife and kids. And, I had to make sure there was great alignment to that. My 10th grade daughter, when we asked her, it was instantaneously a yes. And then my boys got home on Thursday night, and once it became a lot more real, we met with them, and now they took it really hard. And a sixth grader and a fourth grader at a critical time in their life, but when they woke up the next morning and knew maybe some of their friends would be going with them from the staff, it made it a lot easier for them. And we really by midday Friday kind of came to a decision. And for my wife, obviously regionally being a lot closer to her family and our family, and having a chance to be closer to our daughter now as she goes to college, all those things fit. And to be honest with you, they had to fit. There's been some other jobs during the time that were really interesting to me, but culturally were just not right for my family and not the right time. And you had to walk away from it, and you had to be okay doing it because you knew it was for the right reason. And I still feel like every time we've made it for the right reason, there's never been regret. There's never been like, man, I wish I would have done that or this. And I looked at my wife today afterwards, and I think every step of the way we've said, you know what, man, this was the right decision.
I find myself sometimes talking about you, wishing you were more open about some of the things you've turned down.
Yeah.
Because one of the fakest talking points throughout this little process that you just went through was, well, Matt, if there was something so great about him, he would have left Iowa State a long time ago. He would have taken a job if he could have got it a long time ago. Those of us who know you well enough know the opportunities have been plenty.
Right.
You just mentioned the reasons why you turned him down. Now, knowing you as well as I do, I know why you turned him down. But But I think the reasons you turned them down would be foreign to a lot of people out there, because a lot of people job chase, not just in football, but in life. And they think if the money's enough, everything else will just work itself out. And one of the things I always really respected about you, once I really kind of knew those stories, was number one, not only did you turn them down for what I would suggest are the right reasons, certainly you believe they're the right reasons, but number two, you never even made an effort to make sure that was circulated. Like you never even made an effort to drive a narrative, so to speak, to the point where if everyone kept their mouth shut about it, no one would have ever even known about it. And I watched that bubble throughout this cycle. No one ever really had a football reason to push back on why you should not hire Matt Campbell. It was, well, I don't know, man, if he's so good, would he have ever had opportunities before? As much as you're comfortable doing, could you just walk people generally through what those thought processes were like in the past versus what they were like this time around?
Well, you know, one of my all-time favorite poems is The Man in the Mirror. And, you know, we get so caught up in this college football world, which is awesome because there's energy and passion and a great fan base. And it's like I tell our football team all the time in this journey, like, they're going to forget the touchdowns. They're going to forget the tackles. To be honest with you, they're going to forget the wins and losses. But what they're not going to forget is how you made them feel. And they're not going to forget how you treated people along the way. And for me, I've never forgot that value system. So to say I need to go out and self-promote, or I need to go out and say what I did or didn't do, none of it matters. And the reality of it is did you care about people? Did you treat them the right way? Man, did you try to have integrity every step of the way? We know we're not going to be perfect. And when you weren't perfect, can you stand up and say, you know what, I wasn't perfect? And so for me, that's really been a part of like the job journey. And what was different this time is, you know, and I think me and you talked about it again, COVID, I sit at home, you know, I'm this young guy. We go from Toledo, we're starting to have success at Iowa State. And I probably wasn't just like everybody else. And then I get at home and I see, man, there's 4 kids sitting at home. You're like, what the heck just happened? And you say to your wife, like, this is what happens every day. And it was like the greatest 6 months of my life. And because it was like, man, all this winning, all this football, that stuff's cool, but these kids need me, this wife needs me, and that's my number one responsibility. And, you know, what made this right was because the alignment of, I know I can still be a great father and a husband. I know that, man, to be able to full circle moment, let my family, who we've been away from for 10 years, be a major part of the rest of our lives, to let my kids know their grandparents and their aunts and their uncles, and then to have the opportunity to, again, still stand for, I get it, it's a big job, I get it, we want to win, everybody wants to win, but to still build through caring about kids, integrity, man, knowing this will be a transformational journey, not a transactional journey. I chuckled, somebody said, well, how can you go there? You're not going to be able to stand for what you stood for. Watch. Like, we're going to stand for what we stood for, and we're going to do it even in a better way and prove that you can get to the highest level of this profession and this sport by doing it the right way. And that's the challenge we're under, and I look forward to that challenge.
I'll wrap you up on this. This is a conference full of big-time names, big-time brands. You're now the head coach of one of them. But you look down the road, you've got Ryan Day at Ohio State. Michigan's won a national championship in the last few years under another head coach. Dan Lanning's all the way out in Oregon. This is a coast-to-coast conference now. Lincoln Riley at USC. There may be a fan in Harrisburg or like Erie or Johnstown, somewhere like that, who's still on the fence. They want to believe in you. Like they hope you win every game, but they're thinking, man, there's some rock star head coaches in this league. There's some powerhouse programs. Why should I believe Matt Campbell can take us toe-to-toe against them and get the job done? To that guy, what would you say?
Well, again, we're going to have to prove it. Words are great, but we're going to have to prove it. But one of the things that I would say about the region we live in today and where we're at right now is toughness still wins in this sport. And if you look at our teams that we've built through our time, mentally and physically tough, yes. We know how to build mental and physical toughness in a football team. Number 2, discipline. Man, our discipline has got us to play and beat the best of the best. And number 3, the ability to play together. those values, toughness, man, great discipline, great togetherness, those things still reside in any championship football team and football program. And that is what's going to have to reside at Penn State. That's what our team's going to have to look like every fall Saturday. And we can't worry about 1-0 or this or this. We got to worry about one day at a time, creating great championship habits and the opportunity to be who we say we are. And I think those are things that, you know, if you look at the last 10 years at Iowa State, boy, I think for the majority of our time there, every step of the way we've looked like that. And now we get a chance to do it with some of the best of the best.
Matt Campbell, we're happy for you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Congrats.
Yeah, appreciate it.